Hello and welcome to a pressed up preview of Atomic Heart with myself, Brody, Kieran, and Shannon. We've all recently got to check out a bit of a preview for Atomic Heart, which is coming out the 21st of February to consoles and PC. Brody, it's been a little while since we've done this, but you were the first to go hands-on, and Kieran and Shannon got to watch along as you played through it. So I'm eager to start with you. First, describe what you were able to play and what you made of the game so far.
Yep. So the portions of the game we got to see were basically we got to see pretty much the first hour and a half of the game, basically unedited. After that point, we then got dropped into more of like a hub area, which is more open to exploration and I guess enemy combat and stuff like that. But then that also seemed to lead into the next mission directly, like through us, the four greatest minds at Press Start putting their heads together and getting through this puzzle to advance through to the next facility. So it seems to me like, at least structurally, it seems like the game's pretty similar to Halo Infinite in terms of like you have these linear corridor sort of missions which lead into these big hub areas which then lead into more dungeon-like missions. So in that sense, it's pretty cool. I like the way they've done that. But yeah, beyond that, like we got to see obviously one of those boss battles that's been featured pretty heavily in the marketing. And yeah, with that we
this
sort
is
of
the
just,
one with like the kind of whirling ball kind of flying about you and stuff.
That's right, yeah. With a lot of pretty, as I think Kieran mentioned on the day, like very platformer-esque type mechanics where they're doing like AoE attacks and you're trying to jump above like the rings of damage and stuff like that while navigating, trying to shoot their weak points and stuff like it. So from that aspect, it was really cool. But yeah, we definitely got to see a very big chunk of the game, albeit pretty curated. So it'd be interesting to see if it's as consistent when it's all, unedited, if you will.
As you're listening to this, we'll be showing you some gameplay as well that we've been provided of Atomic Heart. I don't know if we've got footage of that particular boss battle you mentioned just there, but certainly some of the combat, which I'm eager to touch on more in a moment as well. But Kieran, watching on, how did you find the initial stages of the game and the way the story is set up? Were you already getting quite invested in their narrative?
Yeah, I think so. I think like watching Brody play through like the very start, the intro was very kind of like setup heavy. He did spend a lot of time just kind of being funneled through areas while a bunch of like proper nouns were thrown at him. So I'm not sure I quite followed along completely, but it definitely does set the tone, and you get a really good sense of like the world. I guess it's very Bioshock in that aspect where they really want to introduce you to this world and how it operates and who the key figures are. So I thought it was, it was long to actually get going, but it was a cool little intro.
Yeah, I feel like watching on just those initial stages, that was kind of all I really got to see. It felt very Bioshock in the way that it really takes like a good amount of time to introduce you to the world, kind of explain the backstory, give you a bit of the characters, and kind of foreshadow some of the enemies that you're going to come across. And then, I left before all hell broke loose, but presumably when it did, shit hit the fan real quick. Shannon, again, also you kind of watching on as Brody was playing through the preview. What did you make of the presentation and the art style? And based on everything I've seen and that kind of brief glance that I did get, it looks pretty incredible.
Yeah, definitely. Like everything from sort of the inside areas that are a little bit darker and moodier to when it opens up to the outdoor areas. Like there's a lot of differing sort of not art styles, but yeah, I just think it looks like two different games when you're inside in some of the more damaged areas, and then these beautiful foresty sort of open outdoor areas. I wasn't expecting there to be that much variety here, and then just loads of personality and everything from like the character art to everything. I can see a lot of people like watching like a launch trailer or maybe this video and being really interested just on how it looks alone. It's very visually appealing and interesting.
Yeah, and if we can just take, I was going to say, if we can take a second to just mention Mick Gordon's contributions to the soundtrack, which we didn't really get to hear much of until that boss fight, but he's riffing like he's got a few things to prove, I think, in the wake of this id Software thing. Fun, so yeah, he is just having a lot of a good time. So
I liked, like, it was adequately heavy, like as you'd expect from Mick Gordon, but there was more kind of synth work in there, which I appreciated too, Brody. You know how much You and I love when things get
yeah.
synthy. So
Oh,
very
yeah.
excited by that. Yeah, the presentation was incredible. Like I was saying to Kieran at one point that like one of the buildings reminded me of like a Soviet era thing that I'd seen on a trip to Poland, like back when I was in uni. It seems like they've taken like a lot of inspiration from that sort of Soviet era thing, but obviously it's like this alternate history kind of really riffing off the idea of automatons kind of featuring heavily in that kind of retro futuristic sort of space. But even like, yeah, the way that they've kind of really just gone mad scientist with certain areas too, and things have kind of got really funky and things being generated by machines themselves. Really quite cool. Brody, I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of more things with you though. Firstly, I wanted to ask about the more kind of Far Cry elements, because that was kind of something we kind of got shown a little bit of, but I don't know how much you've got to experience there in the moment, the gameplay. But like, were there kind of outposty-esque things, like as you're moving around the open world, what sort of obstacles are you facing?
It wasn't so much Far Cry-esque in that sense. Like, yeah, it is like an open sort of hub, like I said, but it felt more to me like, yeah, look, maybe it does open up. Maybe what they were showing us on, like, you know, the map and stuff wasn't, it was a bit stripped back just for the sake of the demo, but it seemed, yeah, more like hubbish to me, where I think your main obstacles were obviously puzzles within the world, but then there was a cool, like, almost wanted level system, like you would see in, like, Grand Theft Auto, called, like, their alarm system, where obviously, as these robots have gone a bit Burko, they'll like sort of spot you on their security systems and stuff, and then obviously descend upon you. So it does, I guess, encourage you to be stealthy in a way, like, because as we saw, and as I got hung up on a bit, like there was an objective that wouldn't let me do it unless I was like not under enemy attack, and then, you know, that went on from there, and it sort of made me approach it in a different way, which was kind of cool. But yeah, like, I didn't really notice a necessarily Far Cry element to it, but I definitely feel I feel like the comparison I'd make is maybe more like Metro Exodus, like those wider sort of areas that they had, but to the extent of like the side stuff, we couldn't really get a gauge for that, because it was obviously, I think, more focused on the demo that we had,
Yeah, you're only in the first hour or two of the game, that's fair. How did you find the combat of the game? Like, obviously it's a first-person shooter, but you've kind of got some other special abilities tied to your kind of AI glove. AI is not the right, robotic glove. Did you find the combat engaging? Was it challenging? Oh, is it? Okay, cool.
Well, I think the thing that surprised me most actually was that the first hour and a half of the game wasn't very shooty at all. Like, there was actually a greater focus on melee combat, which was a little bit challenging. Like, it took some getting used to, but I think once you sort of got how the enemies attack, because there are attack patterns, and like, I'm not going to use the word soulsy or anything like that, because it's definitely not anything like that. But the fact you've got like dodges and stuff, it felt more like a slower sort of Doom almost. In that sense of like the dodging and trying to like use your horizontal space as well. But yeah, like, it's definitely those first few hours are definitely more of a focus on, you know, you find a hatchet and it's your first weapon, and you don't really find many guns or ammo for like that first hour and a half as you first finding your way through the facility. So that was surprising to me. But obviously when I got dropped in this big open world area, I was like armed to the teeth, so I could sort of let loose a little bit more. And the gunplay, I think, probably and the tightness of it falls somewhere between maybe Metro and like a Call of Duty. Like, it's not it's not industry leading or anything like that, but it's actually surprisingly tight, which was really cool. And it obviously, as we've established, like the world and the setting and like the vibe of the game does riff on BioShock a lot, and I feel like the combat does in some ways as well, as you've got like Charles, like your little AI glove that's like polymerized basically, which you can telekinesis people into the air and like shock them in another thing. So it's very plasmidy with gun, like like a real two-pronged attack, as you'd expect. So yeah, all in all, I found it pretty engaging, like the open world stuff and like trying to ward off all these robots. I think I said on the day, I found that to strike more of like a Generation Zero almost like comparison. Like, there's a decent aggression to those robots once you get them riled up, but at the same time it's not crushingly difficult. Like, you can navigate the situation once you're armed up pretty well. So I think the combat's pretty good, probably a bit more tight than I thought it was going to be. I think from all the marketing I thought it looked a bit schlocky and a bit AA, but I think it's actually a bit better than that, and better than the marketing probably gives it credit for.
Kieran, did Brody hand over the controller at any point? Did you get a feel for the combat as well?
I did. I not to a huge extent. I did get to fight one enemy, and I did it a couple of times with different weapons, and it was a lot of fun. The combat has a real good like heft and like crunch to it. Like when you're shotgun blasting a robot in the face, like you can see that it's feeling it.
I did, yeah. I think we got a
pretty cool.
bit of a glimpse at some of the degradation that happens on the enemy types
Yeah.
you come across, and they kind of like reveal weak spots and stuff like that. Did you encounter much of that
Yeah.
in the time you had as well?
I didn't. Did we see much like
I think with like
degradation of robots
yeah,
and stuff?
definitely. Like especially with the hand combat stuff. Like you'd like swing the club at the like robot's head and like parts of their face would like break off and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as weak points go, I didn't necessarily notice that with like the general ads. It was in that big boss fight that they definitely had like
Yeah.
a lot of weak spots and stuff. But yeah, pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I thought the animations in particular were really cool, especially on that boss fight.
Yeah.
Like just the intricacy of the robots and everything they've kind of modeled and animated in them is really
Yeah,
cool.
and so much
Ultimately-
personality as well.
Yeah. Ultimately, the one thing I'll say is, and I think I said this on the day, like games like this often like the ads and like the trailers and stuff make it look one way, and then you ultimately get it in the end, and it's not quite the same. But and there was like a lot of trailers for this game where I was like, there's no way it's going to play this good or look this good. But it actually does. Like, surprisingly, it does. Like, I think I said it during like that boss fight. I was like, look at like the the shrubbery and the debris like flicking up everywhere, and like the animation on this thing. It's crazy good. Like, to think
Yeah.
a team, and I think when we were speaking with Julian, who was there on the day, like he said that he doesn't think this team's all that big. Granted, they've been working on it for 8 years or something like that, but it's still a pretty remarkable accomplishment for a team that's not technically AAA, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's essentially a debut release. I think they kind of done like a VR release
Yeah.
in the past, which may or
and-
may not be available still. But like, yeah, this is kind of their first big kind of foray
As a studio,
into
I think a lot of
game.
the devs have history at other studios, so yeah, but nevertheless, it's still their first title, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it looks at this stage, and based on what at least I guess what I've seen, it looks pretty well executed for what is a very ambitious-looking title. Shannon, to wrap up, kind of final thoughts though, like having watched these two sort of play some of the game, I don't know if you got an opportunity to go hands-on with yourself as well, but
Just when I needed my help with puzzles, that's I was called in as the brains of the operation.
what
how'd
are
that go?
your excitement / interest levels at for the game at this stage?
Yeah, they're massive. Like, I was always intrigued by it, just like whenever we saw it pop up at conferences and stuff, but I just had always pegged it as like a 6 or 7 hour like corridor shooter, which was fine. Like, I was still interested, but it was just so much more in terms of scope and standing out than what I expected. And I'm a big BioShock fan too, and I definitely got, like, if you told me this was made by BioShock people, or it was a BioShock game even, like, I would believe it, to be honest,
Yeah.
which is the highest praise I can give a game like this.
What about yourself, Kieran? Is this one you'll be playing at release, do you think?
I definitely think so. Yeah, like Shannon said, like I've been following it for a while and interested in it, but like just the scope and the scale of things is went far beyond what I was actually expecting from it, even just from like the early sort of sample that we got. So very keen.
And then Brody, to finish with you, I know you've had a lot of hope for this game. You and I have both been particularly excited about it, and I feel like banging on about it for a while. It wasn't long ago that we were talking about on the podcast, like the games we want to see on people's radars this year, and I think you and I both said this one. Is it living up to your hopes and your expectations for it so far? And do you see it being kind of a game of quality that we'll see this year?
I think so. Like, I think even it's sort of my thoughts echo what Shannon's thoughts were, I guess, in that I didn't expect it to have this kind of scope, and like having like the first hour and a half that I got to play was probably what I expected the game to be, but then getting dropped into this wider area with like, even that puzzle, like granted we got hung up on it for a while and it looked like it was all over, but once we finally like broke through that and that led to like the next mission, and then I had to step away for a minute, but then came back and saw like where Kieran had like made it to and like the puzzle that he was doing. I thought this game's just, it's so cool and so creative, and like the world is great, like the combat's fun, and like I said, and I can only echo what I said again, like I didn't expect the game to be as it was marketed, because we've been burnt like that so many times before, like with other games, but it somehow looks as good as it I feel like always has, and it plays probably better than I thought it would. So I'm definitely keen for it, and it'll be one I definitely aim to play. And like the coolest thing is that like for Xbox players, and even I don't know if it's on PC, but like this is coming to Game Pass, so like a game of this quality to land on Game Pass, I think is a pretty good get. So yeah.
Yeah, well, excited to play and hear more, but we will need to wait until nearer to the 21st of Feb when it releases to hear our final thoughts on the game. But yeah, certainly one I'm looking forward to, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on Atomic Heart.
Thank you.